Welcome to the Yank Report, the show where we talk about the U.S. men's national team, and today we're talking about a topic that is one of the most controversial topics in all of U.S. soccer. That is MLS. And we've brought in a man who I consider an expert, a man who has one of the best MLS YouTube channels in all of YouTube. I'm talking about Eli Lesser of ThisWeekInMLS. Eli, thank you for coming to the channel. And by the way, before we even get started, happy birthday. Eli just celebrated his 21st birthday in Las Vegas. So you are living correctly. So happy birthday, Eli, and welcome into the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I would tell you about my trip, but whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Well, you're living right, man, because I see on social media that you're at a bunch of MLS games, and you also got to hang out in Vegas. So whatever you're doing, keep it up. So the first question I want to ask you, I was getting prepared for this interview, and I kind of realized you're 21 years old. So your whole life we've had MLS. You didn't really get to experience what soccer was like prior to MLS being in this country, and I'm sure that your memories of early MLS are different than mine, because I can remember vividly the wild logos and, you know, the wild hairstyles, guys like Alexi Lawless and all these early American stars at the different teams, the dumb, we'll call it dumb team names, and the dumb rules where it had like the countdown clocks and like the weird PKs. Do you remember any of that? Have you?
No, but I get glimpses of that because I go to Syracuse University, and college soccer still has a lot of those weird rules, like the countdown clock. It's weird because you could hit a buzzer beater goal, which is kind of weird to think about in terms of soccer. But yeah, as far as my MLS knowledge, I've researched everything. But in terms of my actual life memory, for me, it started with David Beckham because I grew up in Los Angeles, and that was my first exposure to soccer. David Beckham coming to the Galaxy. I didn't really know much about soccer beforehand, and unlike many U.S. soccer followers, I started with MLS, and now I'm broadening out to European soccer. A lot of people start with European soccer, like a Manchester United, Chelsea, and then they start to hopefully support their local club, which I'm a big advocate for. But yeah, those are my first like early memories. I went to Galaxy matches back in the day, and that's what kind of started it all for me.
Yeah, that's so fascinating because that's such a totally different experience for anyone who is my age. Because MLS was the new thing. It started in '96 after the '94 World Cup, and there was all this excitement. We're going to do soccer our way. And, it kind of was weird at first, and it kind of flopped. And, they were trying to appeal to the regular American sports fan by doing all these regular American sports things, and kind of upset the regular American sports fan wasn't into it, and the European soccer traditional fans weren't into it because it was just a poor amalgamation of all those things. But eventually, by the time you got into it, it started to really become a legit league with some legit players. And guys like David Beckham was probably the biggest DP in the history of MLS, and probably the most impactful player in the history of MLS, if we're all things considered. So that makes sense that he is the guy that kind of brought you in. Now, we were kind of talking before the stream that I asked you if you were into any of the European leagues, and you're pretty much a diehard MLS fan. You might watch a little bit of MLS Europe here or there, but you're mostly MLS. So what is it about MLS that kind of captured you and keeps you so engaged?
Well, I talk about supporting your local club. Like, watching quality soccer in Europe is cool and all, but I can never really feel attached to a club when I can't, go down to the stadium every weekend and support them and meet a bunch of fans. I mean, you could meet a bunch of like Manchester United fans around here and watch at a pub at 6 a.m., but that's not interesting to me. I want to be a part of something that's going to grow and that's continuing to grow. And it's also America. I hate to be that patriot, but we're America, want to support everything that's happening here. So I fell in love with Major League Soccer mainly because of that. And it just, honestly, European soccer, obviously it's legit and it's crazy, but because it's so far away from me, it's hard to envision that as like a reality of a soccer league, because I am so wounded into MLS, and I love Major League Soccer so much. I find the games even more fascinating because oftentimes they're higher scoring. more offensive minded than defensive minded. I know a lot of you tactical wizards out there probably hate me for saying that, but MLS is fun. And I love seeing, guys that I see in college make it to MLS, guys that I grew up with get to the professional level, because we see it happen in other sports. And why shouldn't it happen for soccer here in America?
Yeah, it really is an interesting league whenever you come from watching like the European, well, any other league, and then you go to MLS. There's so many different irregularities that it makes for some interest. You might have a bunch of regular guys, and then some like ex-Argentinian superstar in the middle that's just capable of making these crazy passes. And it's just, how can they get the ball to him in that correct position? And, are they going to be able to put everything together and make it happen? As opposed to, watching maybe like a Dutch league. And, it's bringing up the Dutch. It's kind of interesting that you're in almost any other country, you wouldn't have to like defend why you like the league in your country. Like, I don't think any Dutch fans ever have to explain why they like the Eredivisie, or like any Brazilians have to explain why they like the Brazilian league. Like, it makes a lot of sense to support soccer, the league in the country that you're from. I think every other country in the world does that. It's sort of unique in this country because we have such a young soccer history. Like, the league is older than you, but not much older. It's not older than me, but it's older than you. So the fact that it's like such a young thing, it's so interesting to me, and it changes. It feels like every 5 years or so. Like, it feels like the league is totally different. You just spoke about like the David Beckham era, and I remember that era, but it feels so foreign to what we have now, because all of a sudden, in that era, if you were 21 years old, you probably weren't getting much game time. But in this era, we've got 17-year-olds playing, we've got 18-year-olds playing. It's just a totally different world. How has that been kind of like since seeing the David Beckham era and kind of growing up with that? What's it been like seeing the changes that have happened over the course of the tenure of your fandom? And what were some of the things that really stuck out to you about that?
First of all, I'm just going to put it out there now, because a very unpopular take I have is, a lot of people used to call MLS a retirement league.
Yeah.
And I was like, who cares? I enjoyed seeing certain players play in MLS for a little while, like Thierry Henry, even like Steven Gerrard. I liked seeing them in MLS. I don't care about the whole criticism about that. I enjoyed it. And like, I think if you could see a player like that play for your local club or against your local club, you'd be all for it. Okay, now that we have that aside, I've loved the growth that I've seen in MLS, because I've always had faith in, our kids and our players. And I think for a while, MLS tried to be a league where, we are going to raise young talent, but they're not going to be our young talent. We're going to purchase them from South America and raise them and sell them to Europe. And that hasn't quite gone very well for a lot of MLS teams. You look at Atlanta, and Ezequiel Barco is still there. You look at LAFC, Diego Rossi is still there. And now we're seeing that idea happen, but with the actual American kids themselves. And we're having so much success with that. We have the Venezia guys. We have all the guys that have gone to the Bundesliga. We have all the guys in the EPL now. And it's just so special to see. And I'm fine with MLS being a seller league like that for now, because it is overall going to help the growth of MLS, and not just MLS, but also the U.S. men's national team, which I think will always go hand to hand in MLS. Whether or not you USMNT fans want an MLS player on the roster, you're going to have an MLS product on there. And soon the full squad will be former MLS Academy products. And that's true growth.
Yeah, and the Belgian league, I think, is almost entirely Americans at this point. I'm pretty sure. I haven't looked into it recently, but I'm pretty sure that's accurate. Now, you brought up some of the criticisms of MLS, and there's a lot, man. We have such an interesting, fascinating soccer country, because we have, the largest league in the United States is LigaMX, because we have such a massive and fanatical Hispanic population that loves the league that they grow up watching. But there's also a large group of people, a lot of guys my age, who grew up watching the EPL, on Saturday mornings, or maybe they grew up watching the Spanish Primera Division, or, the Italian Serie A or something like that. And whenever MLS came out, it didn't really offer the quality of soccer that we were looking for, and we just never took to it. So our soccer watching is all about Europe, or there's just a lot of different fans out there. So, what do you think whenever people say things like, MLS is a trash league, or like, nobody. It's terrible players. We're never going to get quality soccer out of that. The United States is never going to have a top quality league. Guys, before we move on with the video, we got an important bit of business that we need to attend to. In celebration of the 2021 MLS All-Star Game, OneFootball will be doing a giveaway on the channel for Yank Report viewers. OneFootball will be giving away one MLS All-Star jersey to a fan base in the United States. If you want to enter for a chance to win, all you got to do is click a link in the description and then fill out your information in order to enter. Now, this is the most important part of this whole thing. Filippo from Tactical Manager has already told me that he's going to enter the competition using my link, and I do not want Filippo to win this jersey from the Yank Report link. I want you guys to win it. So make sure you click the link in the description right now and enter so that Filippo does not win this jersey, because the man already has enough jerseys. Now, thank you to OneFootball for this giveaway, for giving you guys the opportunity to win an MLS All-Star jersey. Now let's get back to the video.
For the most part, those people have not watched an MLS match or have attended an MLS match, because I think just attending an MLS match alone, quality aside, you will have a great time and you'll want to come back. I don't care if I trigger anyone in this comment or in the comment sections, and I'm just going to put it out there now. My least favorite soccer fan are the people who live in MLS cities or even USL Championship cities, and they're huge soccer fans, but they will never go see their local team play, because how are the local teams supposed to get better and to grow without your support? So you're single-handedly keeping the league the way you're criticizing it. So first of all, go to a match, involve yourself into the fan culture, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, because that's happened with a number of people in my life that I've completely converted into Major League Soccer fans. So I mean, all you got to do is actually give it a try, because the second you're in, you're hooked. And that's what happened with me anyways.
Yeah, and it's such a departure to the beginning of the league. And I think if you're someone like me who kind of watched it at the beginning in the late 90s compared to now, I mean, it is such a 180. The fan environments then, where you had the football lines on the field, you had the tickets that were in these massive football stadiums and only had like 15,000 fans in the stands, if that. And those were tickets that were given away to the local middle school or whatever. So like people weren't all that interested. When they show clips of fans in the stands, I mean, people were like barely paying attention, like trying to win whatever raffle was going on in the stadium. Flip that till now, to where you look at like a Portland game or a Seattle game, a Atlanta game. Boy, Austin has one of my favorite games to watch on TV, just to have it on the background, because the sound coming out of that stadium is so good. There's some really, really great soccer atmospheres building in this country.
No, absolutely. And unfortunately, there's still some cities that are kind of stuck in that old era, like a Chicago Fire, where they're at Soldier Field, no one's showing up. And it's unfortunate, because they're the third biggest city in the U.S. They should have a packed stadium, or at least a better product. But yeah, you mentioned all these new teams coming in, Austin coming in, Atlanta a few years ago. They're coming in with huge fan bases. And I'd have to mention LAFC as well. And all of those matches that I've attended have been so much fun. And even some of the classic MLS teams, the OGs that have reinvented themselves almost. I went to the Columbus Crew Stadium opener, lower.com field, and that was one of the most spectacular atmospheres I've ever been a part of. And everyone was just so involved with the club, and they had so much love and support for the team. And I just feel like any soccer fan could get behind that if they just gave it a chance, because really, MLS isn't that far off anymore from all those leagues. And you're right, I wasn't around to see the OG days. It might have been very cringeworthy to watch. But then again, if I look at highlights from the EPL from back then, I feel like they don't even stand up against what's happening today. But that's just my opinion. But yeah, the growth is amazing. And it's not just the product on the field, but it's off the field. And we continue to evolve as fans. And I think MLS supporters in general are becoming smarter about soccer. And I think that's also creating a very fun environment as well.
Yeah, if your soccer diet is all like Barcelona and Real Madrid and Manchester United and Manchester City, Bayern Munich, these top teams, If you watch one of those games and then you flip over to an MLS game, you're definitely going to see a difference in quality, for sure, 100%. But if you're watching these like second tier leagues in Europe, these like Dutch leagues and the Belgian leagues and stuff like that, or even low tier top 5 league, like if you're watching like a Schalke game last year, I watched I still can't pronounce Venetia, the Serie A team that just got promoted. They're better quality teams, I'll give them that, but it's not as if like they're dancing circles around the product that's on the field in MLS. And I think that's an interesting point where like the fascinating thing about MLS is not so much like how far away it is from the top 5 leagues, because it's not the EPL, it's not the Spanish Primera Division, it's not Serie A, but for a league that was started not too long ago, only a few decades ago, to be at the point where it's like a second division, a second tier European league, that's pretty incredible growth. And I think that's the thing that has me the most excited about this league is not so much how far they have to go, but how far they've come in such a short period of time.
Yeah, and you cannot convince me that the Seattle Sounders wouldn't get themselves promoted from the English Championship. I wholeheartedly believe they would.
Yeah, that's a debate, man. I remember last year whenever Daryl DK was in Barnsley, that was one of the big topics of debate, like MLS versus championship. And I'll say championship rosters are going to be top to bottom. They're going to be better than a MLS roster because they're all about the same quality and they're all fighting for minutes. It's definitely a different brand of soccer. It's very much that Route 1 style. It's very much that kick it long and hope something happens. Whereas in MLS, you'll find a lot of different types of soccer, kind of team to team, region to region. You'll have these like South American flair players that are mixed in there that are connecting beautiful passes and stuff. You won't really find that in the championship. Definitely, I think if the Seattle Sounders were in the championship, I don't know they would get promoted, but it's not like they would get like waxed every single game. And I think it's interesting that like, Daryl DK went over there and he was able to step right into Barnsley and play right away and kind of fit in and start scoring goals immediately. And it's not just him. We're seeing other guys go right from MLS to Tanner Tessman went right from FC Dallas. He was playing in FC Dallas just a couple weeks ago, and all of a sudden he's appearing in a Serie A game. So it's not as if the players from MLS can't play in these leagues. We're seeing it happen all the time.
And that's what I mean. I mean, if Daryl DK was able to just go into Barnsley and dominate just like that, I mean, sure, like Daryl DK, his progression was great for the time he was there. But also, I mean, the fact that he was doing better in the championship than he was doing in MLS tells me that they're not far off. Maybe Orlando City could play pretty well in the championship,
Well, I think that's talking about probably the lamest way to evaluate talent that there is out there in soccer, and that's like what league do they play in. And exactly. I think that's so lazy because I'm not just saying that as like a guy who appreciates MLS. I'm saying this as a guy that appreciates like all leagues in Europe, because in Europe it's not about the league that you play in, it's about the team that you play on in that league. Because, for instance, like the Austrian Bundesliga, that's a team that's dominated by Red Bull Salzburg. If you're playing on Red Bull Salzburg, you're playing on a very good team, a team that consistently is putting players to the top 5 leagues in the world. But if you're playing on a team at the bottom of the Austrian Bundesliga, you're not a very quality team. That's, saying a player is in Serie A, are you playing for Venezia or are you playing for Juventus? Like, these are worlds apart. Whereas like MLS is kind of a different thing because of the parity and because of the salary caps and stuff like that. It's a little bit different, but you also got DPs, so that kind of mixes things up. But there's also another huge point, whereas MLS has like 29 teams right now, something like that. Most of these leagues in Europe are going to have 17 to 22-ish. So you're talking about an additional almost 10 teams, an additional 10 rosters, so you're diluting the talent tremendously. So if you want to make an accurate comparison for like MLS to the championship, you'd have to include the championship plus like the next 10 teams in League One to like more or less make a more accurate comparison based on the amount of teams. And once you do that, Now the talent's getting diluted a lot, and it's weird. It's not a apples to apples comparison that I'm trying to say, and it's a frustrating thing that I get seen thrown around a lot. So I feel your pain there.
Yes. But also, you brought up a great point, and a lot of what MLS is criticized for is the parity of the league, which I think is complete bogus. Who wouldn't want a league where you don't know who's going to win every year? You know, why would I watch the Bundesliga if I know Bayern Munich's going to win the league pretty much every year? Why would I watch the Prem if we know only like 6 teams really have a shot? Sure, Leicester won it a few years ago, and that was spectacular, but that's such a rarity, you know? And I think that's what makes MLS so cool is a team could be at the top one year and go right to the bottom the next year. It's a year by year thing. You basically have to constantly rebuild. We've seen cores that have tried to stick together too long in MLS and have not worked. Or have not worked in the long run. So I think that's a great positive thing for MLS, the fact that, you know, you can support your club and you're not supporting mediocrity forever, you know? I mean, they used to have the glory, but Newcastle now, you know, they're cheering for a team that's gonna make them sad and depressed every year. And I don't know why they're gonna keep doing that. But in MLS, I mean, I understand because, you know, you're loyal to your team, but why not support a league where your team can actually pick themselves from the bottom of the basement and reach the top? You know, every single year, it could be a different story. There's always going to be a potential light at the end of the tunnel, even for FC Cincinnati fans. I mean, they're no longer the very last team; they're the second to last team. And you know, that's growth for them. And you know, they have promising players on the field to potentially make a great squad soon. I love MLS because any team can be good and fall from grace as well.
Now, you're making a point in that the parity is a good thing for the league. The parity is a net positive. But depending on who you ask, someone might say the parity is one of the reasons why MLS is bad. The parity is one of the reasons why MLS is a joke. That's how you view that is one of the things that kind of defines how you feel about a lot of things in MLS. And I think what we're kind of walking around here right now is the idea of like American versions of sports, like Americanisms, versus the South American, European traditional model of a lot of these things. And MLS has a lot of these things that really make it a unique league and separate it, that just kind of stem from the league being in the United States. The United States already has a rich sports culture. The United States already has the 3 biggest leagues in the world in the NFL, the Major League Baseball, and the NBA. So we come with a whole lot of baggage. And even though a lot of different things were tried out in the beginning and kind of tossed off because they just didn't work for like what traditional soccer was and what people loved about soccer. There still are a lot of uniquely American things within MLS that people either appreciate or they absolutely loathe. So let's kind of talk about those things. Like you got into the salary cap, the DPs, and like that administrative side. But one of the other ones is something that we have coming up, and that's the All-Star Game. And the All-Star Game is something that, boy, if you want to talk about American sports, I mean, there's few things in sports that are as American as an all-star game. It's something that we see in just about every American sport. It's something that American sports fans absolutely identify with, but it's something that's completely foreign in just about every other part of the world. You're never going to see a Serie A all-star game or like a Brasilia all-star game or anything like that. So what are your thoughts on the all-star game? Do you think this is like a cool thing that makes MLS special? Do you think it's like a thing that's like a joke and needs to be moved on from? Like, what are your thoughts on how MLS should approach things based on like Americanness versus traditionalism?
One thing I think people need to understand about an all-star game is it's not meant to be a competitive thing. It is meant for fun and entertainment purposes only. And I think the MLS All-Star Game does its job better than all the other American sports all-star games, because especially this year with MLS playing against LigaMX All-Stars, I think there's an extra layer of it that makes it more interesting and fun, because there's the growing rivalry between Liga MX and MLS and USMNT in Mexico. I think there's just another layer that makes it more fun. I personally love the All-Star Game in this current format. I wasn't so obsessed with the now former format of an MLS All-Star team playing against a C team of one of the elite European teams, because that kind of felt it kind of made me feel small in a way as an MLS fan. You know, those big clubs are coming to MLS to face off against the best players in MLS, and they're playing their like
Yeah.
17-year-old kids. And I didn't think that was very fun. But we saw in 2019, at least with the All-Star game, first of all, we saw the addition of the skills challenge, or they brought back the skills challenge, because I know they used to do stuff like that, which looked really, really dope. I remember seeing videos of this old goalkeeping competition where they'd like try to chuck the ball past the other goalkeeper. And I remember like Zach Thornton was just like a king at that. But I personally think the MLS All-Star Game is really, really cool. I think it awards the players or even the fan favorites for just being really cool, and any way to involve the fans is just awesome for the league. And I think this current format, hopefully it doesn't flop. I'll be there, and I'm very excited to watch it. Like, this is the most I've ever been excited for an All-Star game.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are excited for this one. I mean, just the ties between the United States and Mexico, anytime that you can bring that together. And it's interesting that LigaMX is having an all-star team, which is interesting. I think we'll get into that MLS LigaMX connection a little bit down the road. But staying on these Americanisms within MLS, I don't think that there's a single more controversial Americanism in MLS than the single entity format without promotion relegation. So I actually made a video about Pro Rel on this channel a few months ago, kind of getting into like the logistics and some of the financial details and some of that stuff that make Pro Rel impossible at this time. But let's pretend like, Eli, that you are like you are Don Garber, but you're not just Don Garber. You're like super magical Don Garber. You're a Don Garber that you can do things in a fantasy world that won't have like financial implications or like crazy implications that'll mess things up entirely. If you could flip that switch and make MLS Pro Rel right now, would you do it? And what's your thoughts on Pro Rel versus single entity?
First of all, if I were to include Pro Rel, I would include the USL championship clubs that are not affiliated with MLS teams, like a Louisville City, like a New Mexico United, because those clubs are in too small markets to be awarded MLS expansion, but because of their play on the field, they deserve to at least challenge for promotion into MLS, especially Louisville, because they've been just so great. Phoenix Rising as well is another one of those. Would I actually do it? I mean, I hate to be that guy and say I love the league as it is right now. Because I come from a background where MLS is my first exposure to soccer, I don't care about promotion relegation as much, or the fact that it is a single entity. However, I get it. I would like less teams to worry about as a content creator, because, you know, I have to watch all 27 clubs each weekend, and that could get a lot. And it's made my job a lot harder over the last few years, not complaining about it. But, you know, it's a thing. And I would I'd go to 20 teams in the first division, and maybe have, you know, we're going to expand to 32. So have the next 12 plus, you know, 8 from the USL Championship. And I would make that a second league and have the classic top 3 and bottom 3 go up and down. That would be great. And then I know MLS announced their new league that they're going to have for youth development, have all the second teams go in there and use the USL Championship as the ladder, and then use USL League One as part of that ladder as well.
Do you think the Pro Rel system is more exciting than the playoff system?
Absolutely not, which a lot of people may disagree with. Why do you want, I mean, it's great to see teams fighting for their spots, but don't you want to see teams fighting for who's best at the same time? I think the way MLS has done the playoffs over the last couple seasons have been the most entertaining playoffs I've seen in any sport. The single elimination format, much better than the two-legged format, in my opinion, and we've seen better results from it. I mean, I would not get rid of the playoffs even if I had pro relegation, you know? And you realize, like, you know, in other leagues, the top team at the end of the regular season is the champion. But we know in MLS, if you win the Supporters' Shield, there's a good chance you're not winning the MLS Cup, because very rarely do those teams actually do. And I think it makes it even more entertaining, because you could feel like if you're a fan supporting a club that just made the playoffs, you know, you still have a chance and you still have more fight in you. But if you're, you know, 7th in the conference or like 6th overall, you're looking at that top team in a normal league and you're like, oh, well, we're not going to reach them. So what's the point at this point? Because we're not trying to qualify for UEFA Champions League or Europa League. There's not really, they don't really do it that way in terms of CONCACAF Champions League. So I would much rather keep the playoffs over anything if MLS were to go through major changes. Even with adding promotion relegation, you have to keep the playoffs.
It's interesting, man. The playoffs are just so synonymous with American sports. Like, it just seems odd that we would have any league and any top sport without playoffs. It's whenever the Super League came out, and I was talking to a lot of English fans and European fans on this channel about promotion relegation and like the excitement of like a relegation battle or a promotion battle or something like that. I mean, that's definitely something fascinating and interesting there. But it's hard for me to say that like that's more interesting than like the playoff system in the United States. It's not as if like American NBA fans are like screaming for pro rel to make the NBA more interesting. Like that's not an argument or a discussion that's taken place. It's not happening in Major League Baseball. It's not happening in the NFL. Like, people are pretty content with their single entity and this idea that next year could be our year. I mean, we've seen it happen in MLS, and we've seen it happen in just about every American sport where a team goes from worst to first, and it's something that's uniquely centered in the single entity system with the salary cap and all that stuff. So it's an interesting discussion, but I don't think that there's like a clear winner on either side. At least that's how I've come away from it.
Well, hey, you said I was the magician Don Garber. I would include both in my pro rel system. I would have the promotion relegation playoff, maybe have the third worst play the third best of the other league. That could be a cool playoff game in itself. But I'm keeping the playoffs the way they are because I've loved them the past couple of years more than ever.
One of the big pro rel discussions is that pro rel helps develop better soccer players. That the United States would be more competitive internationally if we had a pro rel system that was, I guess, encouraging selling players and encouraging promotion and consistently bringing the best players to the top leagues. How do you feel about that argument?
Well, that's just assuming that players in the U.S. don't care that they're on the bottom of the table. I disagree. I know Zlatan came out. I was the one who filmed that video of him going, the playoff format's terrible. He said the F word. But that's just assuming that USA players don't care. Sure, I know it's a total different thing, and the fight to get promoted or the fight to stay alive. But even in MLS, I mean, there's the Wooden Spoon Award, which is just like the most embarrassing thing to ever earn. And these players are still fighting for their spots week by week. Not every wonder kid is going to get all the minutes they deserve. I mean, I watch the LA Galaxy every week. Efra Alvarez has to fight each week for his spot on the team. It's not like they're just handing him the spot to be the star of the show or anything. I mean, every MLS team has their kids, and they've had to earn their spots. And we also have kids who've fallen through the system who always have to earn their spots and fight to get to MLS. I mean, I'm a huge advocate for the college soccer game. That's another controversy for another time. But as someone who attends Syracuse University, a pretty prominent soccer school now with guys like Miles Robinson, Tajon Buchanan killing it, those guys have such a road to climb just getting to the professional level. And to say that like kids like that don't have the fight that people that are trying to survive the European game have, then I think that's laughable to me, because Tajon Buchanan specifically has really had to fight his way from the college game at Syracuse to having some very big mishaps at the start of his time with the New England Revolution to stardom. And look what he's brought to the New England Revolution and what he's bringing to Canada. And now he's on his way to Germany right now as we speak. He is I guess he got off his flight, but I think he's going to be with Freiburg, which will be huge.
Yeah, and what a Gold Cup that guy had. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Efra Alvarez. Another one is Ricardo Pepi. Yep. He's a player that was behind their DP. Is his name Hara?
Franco Jara, yeah.
Franco Jara. I believe he's on like $4 million. I think he's the highest paid player in the club, but he was just being ineffective. They gave Ricardo Pepi a shot. Ricardo Pepi is probably on way less money than that, and he's just been so effective that he's keeping this big money DP on the bench, which is kind of crazy in MLS terms, to have somebody who is worth so much money, who is worth probably 10 to 20% of the entire team's salary cap, sitting on the bench so that an academy product can go out there and play. I mean, it's a fascinating development within the league. I want to get into a few more like American uniquenesses because there's just so much. You kind of came into the league as it was really starting to sort of hit its stride and kind of figure out what it was in that David Beckham era, whenever the league like sort of kind of found like the first little shreds of legitimacy. But over the years, and especially with the development of MLS, there has been a fight over the culture of American soccer from the very beginning. And that stems not just from how the national team plays on the field, which is a huge discussion, and there's been a book written about that, but how American fans are expected to act in the stands, what the stadium should be like, what kind of chants that the fans should have. Should they chant? Should they sing? You know, is it football? Is it soccer? Should there be should it be like an American football game? Should it be like a European soccer game? Should it be like a Mexican soccer game? And I think we're seeing MLS right now kind of come into its own, where we're having this era of fans come through, this generation of fans come through that regionally are making the team their own. And we're seeing kind of distinct fan groups. You know, the difference between like the Portland Timbers fans versus the Atlanta United fans versus the Nashville fans versus the Austin fans. It's really interesting to see how regional MLS has gone. So how do you feel about MLS and like all the pressures to kind of be certain ways and fit in certain boxes?
I think the teams that are succeeding the most are the teams that don't feel that pressure. You know, they just want to represent their city. And you mentioned the Portland Timbers. They're the team that arguably does it the best. And it's why their fan experience is easily one of the best in MLS. And, you know, teams like Atlanta, they weren't trying to be someone else. They're just being Atlanta. And that's what's been so great for them. I think maybe teams that do feel the most pressure are the teams that aren't succeeding as much, maybe in bigger markets like one of the New York teams or Chicago, where they kind of feel that pressure because they have so many European soccer fans there to kind of cater to them, but also try to cater to their big audience of other sports. You know, Chicago and New York being two big sports cities. But I think why it's worked so well in LA is because everyone's just kind of being themselves. Everything about the culture has just grown organically. You know, nothing feels forced when you go to a Galaxy match or an LAFC match. And that's really, really cool. And, you know, those people are so hardcore about their clubs. And, you know, I go to LAFC matches sometimes, and after it, you know, the fans, even after a loss, they're just marching and drumming in the streets and just having a great time because everyone just wants to be there and support their local club. And that's the true beauty of the game of soccer and the game of soccer here. And I call it soccer, by the way, because the league I support is Major League Soccer. It's not Major League Football, which is why I call it soccer. When I'm talking about the Prem, I call it football. But
even though there's a lot of football clubs in the soccer league.
Yeah, which is weird. I don't quite get that. I get it, but I also don't. But I also don't really love saying SC very much.
Yeah, I know.
Of USC, which is just a few blocks away from me. But yeah.
It's so different for like Austin FC is a team that started this year, right? Compare that to a team like Blackburn Rovers that's been in England for the last, say 150 years or so. Like, how are you supposed to have the same culture as a team that's had generations upon generations upon generations upon generations live and die with one club and create so much culture versus a squad that's like, we're starting today. Here are our colors. Here are our chants. This is what we believe in. This is the culture of our club. That idea of I believe you said artificial culture versus like developed culture. We don't have a lot of developed culture here because we haven't been here for very long. You can take culture from other sports in this country that have been here for very long. There are, like Austin has culture, Atlanta has culture, Nashville has culture, LA has culture. There's culture within these cities, but within these clubs, it's all new. So there definitely is that kind of like juxtaposition and kind of a figuring out of a league that's still in its infancy compared to every other league in the world. I do want to shift gears. We mentioned Liga MX a little bit earlier, and I did mention earlier that Liga MX is the biggest league in this country when it comes to TV views and revenue because of the massive and fanatical Mexican population in this country that are just living and dying by their clubs back in Mexico. And boy, over the last, what would you say, 10 years or so, we've seen just like this movement of like Liga MX and MLS just trying to get together. They just seem like a couple that sees each other across the dance floor and just has been getting closer and closer to each other, and has just kind of been circling. And we hear these rumors about, you know, a super league or like whatever. We've seen this year they've come together with the friendlies and also in the All-Star game. What do you think about, as you see these two couples eyeing each other from across the dance floor? What do you think about the future, some type of mixed future between Liga MX and MLS, or what that even looks like?
I always view Liga MX as that girl that you like, you know, you can't be in a relationship with, but you know you're gonna like, you're interested. You know, you like to peep over, you like to, you know, flirt a little bit, and I think that's how it should stay with MLS and Liga MX, just because of the way the two leagues run. They're so different. The cultures are a bit different. Some are intertwined, but some are different. But there's always that sense of rivalry from the US and Mexico where we have to beat each other, you know? And I don't think they need to be one league for the clubs to really feel that rivalry and intensity, because tournaments like the CONCACAF Champions League exist, the Leagues Cup exists, and the Campeones Cup exists. And I think that just adds to the rivalry in a good enough way for me, a satisfying way to me. And now we have this all-star game, which just keeps adding it. I think the leagues run too differently for them to ever be combined into one. MLS would have to change everything entirely for their clubs to maybe succeed in a combined league between the two. Because if you adopt, you know, like financial fair play and MLS, then obviously certain MLS teams are going to be better than Liga MX clubs very quickly because of money. But because MLS is such a single entity league, which I'm fine with personally, you know, it's going to be hard for any of the MLS clubs financially to put together a squad that's going to beat the top Liga MX squad.
Yeah, it's both groups want something different from the other group that the other party has. You know, like the Mexican league is having its struggles. They're having some financial struggles here and there. I mean, I believe they paused promotion relegation for a season or two. I'm not sure if they kicked that back off yet, or what's going on over there. You know, if you're a follower of the Mexican national team, you know that there's long been an issue of Liga MX clubs refusing to sell their young prospects over to Europe. They're kind of holding them hostage there. That's been an issue over there. And all the while, year over year, as Mexico's kind of struggling with these things, with these Liga MX issues, MLS is just kind of year by year kind of growing in popularity. And I think everybody sees that there's a lot of potential in this country for this market to grow. I mean, we're already seeing the Mexican national team. I believe they play more friendlies in the United States than they do in Mexico. So they are very much understand the potential in the United States as a soccer market because of their enormous amount of fans here. They understand the volume and the TV numbers. So it's definitely something that isn't going away anytime soon. And on the flip side, MLS understands that we have this massive population of Mexicans in this country that aren't watching MLS, that are watching Liga MX. And if they can find ways to win over those fans, it's only going to be better for the league. And, you know, you can definitely see this is what one party wants and this is what the other party wants. But, boy, how that shakes out, I don't know. But are you excited for the MLS All-Star game that's coming up that's actually going to be an All-Star game between MLS and Liga MX?
1,000%. The only sad part is the fact that both Carlos Vela and Chicharito will not be playing for the MLS All-Stars due to injury, and that's kind of a blow to me.
That's a tragedy.
I would love to beat Liga MX with former products of Liga MX against them. That would be really, really fun. And, usually when it is a U.S. versus Mexico situation, guys like Chicharito and Vela, I'm rooting against, but because of the LA hometown guys, I want to see them represent us, and it may add like an unfair advantage, because MLS has been draining Liga MX of talent. I mean, most of the stars in MLS were former Liga MX guys. And I think that's great. I love it for MLS. I don't really care how it affects Liga MX. It just makes the MLS clubs better, and I'm all for that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. This gets a lot of pushback because, people just don't like MLS for whatever reason, for one reason or another. But it definitely looks like if you step back and take a look at this entire hemisphere, like, a lot of the leagues have really struggled with COVID and have been struggling for a while. Liga MX is one of them, but also, a lot of the other South American countries have been struggling with that. And as a result, MLS has been able to get a lot of South American players to come into the league. They've gotten a lot of Mexican players to come into the league. And it's not a crazy statement to say, in 25 years that MLS is the second biggest league in this hemisphere behind the Brazilian league, that they would catch Liga MX and potentially even pass them up. So it's fascinating that that is on the horizon, and that there's just so many layers to this all-star game between Mexico and the United States, or I'm sorry, MLS and Liga MX. I'm particularly fond of the idea that Carlos Vela doesn't play on the Mexican national team, and Chicharito hasn't been playing on the Mexican national team, despite the fans really wanting to see him. And these two players could have been squaring off against Liga MX. That would have been so much fun.
Absolutely, especially guys have taken their spots like a Funes Mori.
Yeah,
and that adds that layer to that. But it's gonna be really fun to watch. I'm just very, very, very much hoping that MLS comes away with it, or else it will be a little embarrassing. I'd like to keep the streak of USA MLS beating Mexico Liga MX, but obviously they have the upper hand in terms of the club competitions that we're in with them, which is unfortunate. But we've seen some MLS teams make some runs and get some very impressive results anyways. Like LAFC last year in the CONCACAF Champions League. Sure, they didn't end up winning in the final, but they beat 3 Liga MX teams to get to the final, which was unheard of. So
yeah, the CONCACAF Champions League is fascinating for me, man. Every year, people say it doesn't matter, but I feel like every year, like, people care a little bit more. Like, it's just incrementally growing, and I think if ever an MLS team wins that thing, which it's going to happen eventually, I think that's going to really reverberate through CONCACAF, soccer and CONCACAF for a while. I want to talk about some MLS right now. Let's talk about the standings. One thing particular that I find fascinating is we've got 3 teams in Texas, and they are at the bottom of the standings, man. Particularly an FC Dallas squad that just keeps pumping out talent to Europe, that they've become this hotbed of talent within MLS, but can't seem to put it together on the field. What's going on over there?
Well, that's almost the negative side of raising so many academy products, is you're constantly having to filter new guys in and out of the system, and that's part of it. I mean, we talk about it. It's all about who you use your DP spots on in MLS sometimes. And Franco Har being benched by an 18-year-old, sure, the 18-year-old is incredible and deserves his spot, but just the fact that you use your DP on a guy who can't outplay an 18-year-old, I mean, that's part of what's going on with Dallas. You could talk about the defensive issues. And then some of their young guys, when you're a team that produces a lot of young guys, some of them are going to be standouts and amazing, and some of them are going to be misses. That's just the natural part of the game. And a team like FC Dallas, who mainly focuses on those young guys, they're going to see the best of it and the worst of it, and I think that's why they're at the bottom. If
we were to ask like random Americans, which would be one of the biggest soccer hotbeds in the United States, I think a lot of people would circle the city of Houston, just because of the massive Hispanic population within that city. And yet, I mean, that club has almost been forgotten about within MLS. I mean, I don't hear people talking about it. I don't know if I could name 2 players on that squad right now. It just seems so uninteresting. So, Houston, I live in Louisiana, so Houston is the closest club to me. And I've tried to like Houston a few times, and it's just never happened. I've never been motivated to go out there and watch one of their games. What's going on there? Why can't a club in Houston work?
It's funny you bring up Houston because recently on Twitter, I asked people for a TikTok idea, spoiler alert, which club has the worst front office? And there was an overwhelming amount of people that mentioned the Houston Dynamo, hashtag fire Matt Jordan. And I think that's where a lot of issues stem for clubs. How could you be in I mentioned Chicago being the third largest. How could you be in the fourth largest city in the U.S. with a huge Hispanic population, have a stadium, a soccer-specific stadium downtown, and still be one of the biggest flops? It's all about the front office here because there is no excuse for Houston not to be one of the best teams. We've seen them have success in the past, 2006, 2007, also 2011 and 12. They didn't beat the Galaxy in the MLS Cup, but they made it to the MLS Cup. That was huge. They've had legends. They've had Jeff Cameron. They've had Stuart Holden. They've had tons of great players in the past. It's just unfortunate because the front office or the marketing, whatever it is, the fact that they have zero presence in that city is really disturbing. And I can't pick out one thing that's been wrong for them, but I think it definitely starts with ownership up top and then the front office right below them. That's really effing it up for them. And, they got Austin FC, who's already the biggest club in Texas, and this is their first season in the league.
Yeah,
which is
I went to Austin a couple weekends ago, and there's Austin FC stickers everywhere. You see the brand represented all over. I went out one night while the team had an away game, and you saw the jerseys everywhere. Everybody was out at the bar wearing a jersey or a hat or something like that. In Austin, it's huge. In Houston, boy, they like you said, they haven't really made much of an impact on the culture. Now let's talk about a club that recently has been very successful, but is not very successful right now, and that's Toronto FC. They find themselves in the bottom of the standings. What's going on over there?
I kind of briefly mentioned this earlier, where in MLS, if you try to keep the same core players for a long amount of time, eventually they're going to get old and stale and not work out. And that's what I'm seeing in Toronto. But I think a huge thing for them was this offseason losing head coach Greg Vanney and replacing him with Chris Armas. One of my things that I absolutely hate that happens a lot in MLS is coaches with one style of play acquire a set of players that do not fit that style of play at all. Chris Armas grew up with not grew up, but he was part of the Jesse Marsh Red Bulls high press era. And he tried to bring that to Toronto with a bunch of lazy guys, the guy, no offense to Josie Altidore, but guys like Josie Altidore, you're not going to expect him to high press for most of the match.
Michael Bradley's not going to high press. That's not the guy you want.
Exactly. And that's what's gone wrong with Toronto. Now they fired him and they brought in a great player in Jefferson Soteldo. And he hasn't quite flourished yet because they just haven't picked an identity now under their interim coach. So they are going to be in the gutter this season. It is what it is. They just need to find a new head coach and either have a roster overhaul or find someone who suits the players. But I would suggest the A there and have a roster overhaul this offseason and kind of start from scratch. The era of the 2017 dominance is past. I mean, we're 4 years removed from that incredible season with Giovinco, Vasquez, and all those guys. And, it is time to rebuild. Just let go of it. And Toronto right now is what they were before that big era, which was kind of at the bottom of the league. And I know now that they've established themselves as a relatively big club in MLS, they really have to have the motivation to recharge and reload.
Now, we talked about the bottom of the league. Let's talk about the top of the league a little bit. Seattle Sounders came out the gate screaming hot. Despite the fact that they were missing Jordan Morris and Nico Ladero was out there, they still found ways to just get win after win after win. What's going on up at Seattle?
It's the winning mentality that they've instilled into themselves since 2016, or really since they came into the league. They've always wanted to be winners, and in whatever situation it is, they have to win. And we even noticed that with the League's Cup recently, which people consider a weak tournament, irrelevant tournament, a pointless tournament. But hey, unlike Sporting Kansas City that went in and just played their kids and let them run against Club Lyon, Seattle was like, we have the opportunity to win silverware here, and we're going to do it. And they beat Oh my God, who they beat? Oh, they beat Tigres, of course. They beat Tigres 3-0, the biggest club in Mexico right now. And they went because they have there's silverware, there's a trophy on the line. Whether it's regarded as one of the best ones or the worst ones, they're still going to go for it because that's what that club is. And even when they had so many injuries and they were playing their academy kids most of the time, those kids were raised up into the idea that they're going to win every single match and that they need to win every single match. And that's why Seattle's been so successful. And it sucks because I don't really like Seattle very much because their fans constantly remind me about how good they are. And, it gets annoying after times, but you can't deny what they've done for MLS and what they've done in MLS.
That Rui Diaz guy, he's pretty good. He's pretty good at the soccer. He helps. The team at the top of the league is a team that, boy, I just can't get into that logo, man. That it's an MLS 1.0 logo, an MLS 1.0 team name. I feel like they need to change that up. Oh God, it's just rough looking at it. I mean, it's just like, oh God, it is just a 1996 clip art come to life expression of color and patriotism just splattered all over a jersey. The New England Revolution are in first place in MLS right now. What's going on over there aside from just a atrocity of uniforms?
You know what? I'm going to disagree with you on the uniforms. I think nothing describes MLS better than the Revs 1.0 logo. They're the last of the MLS OGs to do a rebrand. They will be doing a rebrand, so you're in luck, I guess. And we've seen the leaked logo. It's cool, whatever. I don't really care. I will defend the Crayola flag till I die. It's funny because when I got into soccer, I used to think that was the USMNT logo. I was wrong about that. But talk about the Revs. I mean, I was a huge fan of them last season when they were the 8th seed, when I didn't think they were that bad of a team. And it was because Carlos Gil was injured. And I knew that the second he would be back and healthy, they would be a great team. And they almost made it to the MLS Cup last year as an 8th seed in the playoffs. They were one win away from reaching it. And so I've always had the feeling that if Carlos Gil and Gustavo Bo are playing their best game, they are the best duo in MLS. And so far, that's what they've been showing this season. Sure, Carlos Gil's been injured the last couple of weeks, but the team is so confident right now that even without their best player, who was the sure lock for MVP at the time, now that he's injured, Rui Diaz has kind of taken that spot again. I mean, it's just fantastic what this team has been able to do and the winner mindset that they've instilled into themselves, where everyone is just so confident in all their abilities. You see after they score a goal, they're just smiling because like, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. And they're trying new tricks and all of that. Last match, we saw Henry Kessler push up all the way up the pitch as a center back, and he was at the other sideline, and he shot in a ball into the box, and Tejan Buchanan got on the end of it. It was just beautiful to see. And just the happiness and confidence that this team has, I think out of the Supporter Shield teams of the last few years, this is a team I could think could actually win MLS Cup, which is weird because thinking of the New England Revolution, they are 0-5 in MLS Cups, which is so depressing. Yeah. But if any Revs team were to do it, it would be this team.
Could they do it if Tejan Buchanan gets sold?
I know for a fact that if he gets sold, he will still remain with the Revs for the rest of the season because Bruce Arena is not that type of guy.
Yeah. Boy, Bruce Arena, man. We've seen so many coaches come through this league. We've seen people cry out for more foreign coaches. And yet, through it all, Bruce Arena, the old tree of MLS, just seems to be able to get it done wherever he goes. It's very impressive to see.
And Bruce, we trust. I mean, you can never doubt a Bruce Arena squad. And even as the 8th seed last year, no one was counting the Revs out.
Speaking of MLS coaches, there is an ex-MLS coach kind of making waves in Germany right now. We've seen Jesse Marsch go from RB Salzburg to RB Leipzig. I believe they got their first victory of the Bundesliga season last weekend. Jesse Marsch is pretty much holding up the mantle for American coaches that graduated from MLS in world soccer right now. Do you think there's an opportunity for other MLS coaches to make a similar jump and to make a splash in Europe?
No, absolutely. And you briefly mentioned how maybe some MLS fans want more international coaches, but that goes against what Jesse Marsch has done. It's like, how are we going to get more Jesse Marsches out there if we're not having American coaches coaching the domestic clubs to start? I think there are certain MLS coaches who could probably make it abroad. Maybe some of the best MLS coaches are better suited for the Major League Soccer game, but Jesse Marsh's tactics have been amazing. I always thought Berhalter actually would be one of the guys to go to Europe next. And maybe after the USMNT, that's his next job. I don't really see him coming back to MLS. I think that his tactical awareness of the game might be at the level of a European coach. That might be very hard for some of you USMNT fans to digest, but hey, I mean, the guy's winning trophies, so you can't really complain. I don't get where all this Greg Berhalter hate comes from just because he was an MLS coach.
Yeah, that's a whole different conversation. But
Yeah,
I tend to agree with you. I think best case scenario is that Greg Berhalter performs well in the upcoming World Cup and then ends up with a pretty good job somewhere in Europe. I think that would be fantastic for U.S. soccer to develop this trend where, we can get the best American coach to come be the coach of the national team, and that'll open the door for them to go off to Europe. And then suddenly American coaches are the hot new thing in Europe. I mean, we got 2 in the Bundesliga that are doing pretty well right now. Eli, I think we're coming up on the hour mark, so I feel like I got to let you go to get back to your jet-set, high-flying 21-year-old life. Before I let you go, I'm going to ask you a couple of quick-fire questions that I ask everybody. The first one is going to be specific to you, though. This is going to be an Eli-exclusive question. What is your all-time favorite MLS jersey?
Ooh, all-time favorite. I thought you were going to ask favorite player. Wow. I mean, when I think of MLS and glory days, actually, no, I wouldn't even say that. Honestly, right now, I love the Galaxy community kit, the throwback jersey, just because it gives me flashbacks of the past and kind of reminds me of where MLS has come from. I kind of like retro kits in general, and it just shows you how different the Galaxy were then, but have still had the same mentality the whole way. So I got to love that kit. But favorite, ooh. Do I want to go with one of the really gross ones from 1996? Because I would rock any of those. I would rock the Tampa Bay Mutiny gross green right now. And I would have it.
Somebody posted a picture of the Dallas Burn uniform. Oh, it was rough, man. And not only was it rough design-wise, but they were also super baggy at the time. And they looked like they were made out of burlap. Just, oof.
I'd rock it.
All right, so your favorite U.S. men's national team jersey of all time?
I like the Waldo. Where's Waldo, man? It's classic. I mean, I'd rock that. I also love, I forgot when it was. Maybe it was the 1994 World Cup. I have this picture of Alexi Lawless in my mind with one of those jerseys on. It was the blue one, but it
with the stars.
Yeah, I kind of like that. Why not? And an unpopular opinion would be, I believe it was like 2015. We had this Nike, like it started out white, but then it got really, really blue at the end. I kind of liked it, but
the
a lot
gradient
of people
jersey. Yeah. And it had the red little shirt. I have one. Yeah. I don't have it up behind me, but I have one. That's probably my least favorite U.S. men's national team jersey of all time.
I have fond memories of that time. That was when I was, at that point, I had started This Week in MLS, and I had become like a hardcore fan of the league and U.S. soccer by that point. So that's why I have very fond memories. And like being a Galaxy guy, watching, Jossie Zardes score against the Netherlands in that jersey. That I'll always have that memory in my head.
Michael Bradley had some great games in that jersey. Remember that. But it's whenever you buy it and you wear it, it has that goofy little red triangle right here. And it looks like you're wearing a red undershirt, but you're not wearing a red undershirt. I just, that was rough. Anyway, moving right along. Whenever you're watching a big game, do you have any rituals or superstitions?
Oh, I'm by myself and I'm on the couch and I turn my phone off and no one could touch me, no one could reach me, and no one can talk to me. I'm very much a laser-focused guy when I'm watching a match. And, I really try to feel, not necessarily, I don't really have the tactical awareness, I'd say, of the game, but I try to feel the energy of the players and the mentality, what they're thinking at that time when they're doing things. And I feel the emotion. And here I love, like you mentioned, having the fans in the background. I have the volume very high up because I love hearing the chants and all of that. But I'm very laser focused. I'm not really a social guy anyway. So
yeah, man. Some people say they like to go to bars and stuff to watch games. Like, how do you do that? But anyway, Eli Lesser, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we go, can you take a second to tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, definitely my biggest platform is Instagram. So follow me at This Week in MLS. I'm also on Twitter and YouTube and TikTok. And I'm also on LAFC Fan Show 110 Football. So there we have an episode released every Friday on the LAFC YouTube channel. So make sure you check that out. I do not talk about LAFC on the show. I talk about the rest of the league in like a weekly editorial. So if you want to hear me rant about MLS even more, then go check that out as well. But also make sure you follow Yank Report on Twitter and YouTube. He is not paying me to do that. I just think it's a nice thing to do. I enjoy being here. I enjoyed talking to you. And I love your background in general. Every time I watch your videos, I want to see that pop figure of Pulisic. And that studio, that setup is sick. It's sick. And your editing is awesome. And if you like long form US MNT content, then Yank Report is your guy, so go check that out. But
I appreciate that, and I appreciate you giving a shout out in the hour mark, as if like, who are these people that have watched this for the last hour and are like, I don't know about this guy. Anyway, Eli, thank you so much for joining us, guys. If you could, please hit that like button so you can help out this video go far and wide and share Eli with as many people as possible. If you haven't done so, please hit that subscribe button. On behalf of Eli and This Week in MLS, my name is Sam, and this is the Yank Report.